May I please have your full and undivided attention? It is time for the Paranormal Rundown. Hello, this is Cedric Danquil Smythe. I'd like to welcome all fans of the paranormal, the unusual, the slightly off-kilter, the frightening, the terrifying, the horrifying, and simply the occasionally entertaining. This is the Paranormal Rundown. There's no place else like it. The ever-growing list of paranormal topics is now at 2,360 topics. Tonight we're going to be covering the foreign accent syndrome. We're going to be talking about Omm Seti, the British woman who became the world's best Egyptologist. We'll be talking about epigenetics, the 100th Monkey Syndrome, count them, 100, and the Smiley Face Killers, as well as other murder cults throughout history. It'll be a smashing time. And of course, the gang of nerds being who they are, there will be several dozen side topics, all of which will be attacked with astounding gusto.
Hello all, and welcome back to the Paranormal Rundown, episode 16. And though we are at least currently missing the esteemed Father Birdsong, we have a special guest, Dr. Bert, who has appeared not only on Victor's Trailer Trash Terrors, but also on my own podcast, Southern Demonology. He is a psychiatrist and esteemed poetic soul, and who has a lot of extremely deep insights. That's why he has been on both of our podcasts. We love to hear his thoughts on the world, and what better forum or venue could you ever ask for with all of the rabbit holes and random thoughts that we tend to have on this particular podcast, in which to showcase his amazing strengths and poeticness. So, Bert, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you, JJ. I'm doing fine. Still recovering from all the nice words you say, and I'm not sure if I will be able to match those in real.
No pressure.
No pressure. No.
Well, that's what I like to do. I like to set an extremely high bar. What can I say?
Yeah. Well, the positive thing of setting the bar really high is that you walk under it, so you don't have to jump or stumble across it.
See, there's the poet. There's the poet. Okay. Well, Bert, you know the rules of the rundown, and I mean, essentially the first rule of the rundown is there are no rules of the rundown, but there is a general structure. And the general structure is we have a large Excel spreadsheet, which now has 2,340 topics in it.
Growing every episode.
Growing every episode, because I find new things and I put them in there. And there is some overlap, of course. But it covers directly paranormal topics, ghosts, demons, cryptids, all that kind of stuff. It covers odd biblical topics. It covers odd social topics. So it's getting to be a pretty big compendium of ideas. And it's a good way of getting a conversation started. And all we do is we bring the spreadsheet up. I press the F9 key for a minute, and then at some random point, I let go. And we go with whatever we've got. If we have somebody who wants specifically to talk about something, then we talk about that. If we come up with a set of topics that just really stinks, we can get another set of topics just by hitting F9. So, our
well, I would say that's pretty, in general, that's what we do. We all come on and we let go.
Yep, let go. So, the first set of topics, the first set of 6 topics, is topic number 1, atheism in all of its forms. Number 2, foreign accent syndrome. Number 3, spiders in the big hairdo, deadly spiders in the big hairdo. Number 4, trains hitting school buses and the sequelae thereof. Topic number 5, historical photos of vampires or supposed immortals. And topic number 6, ghost in the machine as a concept. Often, if there's a really great topic, somebody says, I want to jump right on that. Does anybody feel anything about these, positive or negative?
What do you think, Bert? Does anything stand out to you?
Yeah. The second one is foreign
accent syndrome.
accent syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
What's that? Is it?
Foreign accent syndrome is when I've heard about 2 forms of it. One of them is after a head injury, blunt head trauma. Somebody will wake up from a period of time with a coma, and they will find themselves speaking in a perfect British or Dutch or French accent, which to me is a pretty fascinating thing. And I've also heard about it happening after just psychological trauma.
And dementia is also.
With dementia.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about Schwarzenegger, but that's another.
That would be a foreign accent. If I suddenly started talking in full-on Schwarzenegger speak, that would be appropriate.
Pete Holmes does a phenomenal sound of his, and he has entire bits in which that's all he does. In fact, there's a famous skit in which he's doing an infomercial for Accent Be Gone, and he's talking just like a regular American would, and then it begins to lose its effect, and you start to hear the rare speak through, and it's just hilarious. It's really good.
We need to acquire a subject. Yeah.
Well, I like ideas like the foreign accent syndrome because it gets across the point to me of how much of the brain-mind interface we just don't really understand at all. I mean, I assume that I talk the way I talk because of, well, some of it's been conscious decisions, but mostly it's been the people that I've grown up around. I follow their way of speaking.
I remember, Victor, that you said in an earlier podcast that you had this example that you wanted to sound like a certain person.
Absolutely. I was growing up in Converse, Louisiana, which was, well, I mean, man, it's about as redneck as it could get. And what wasn't redneck was angry Cajun. And I can just remember how aggressive the speech was. And it scared me sometimes. I'd be listening to these people talk, and you could just tell how angry they were. And I decided that I didn't want to talk like that. So what I based my speech patterns on was Walter Cronkite, who was the CBS news anchor at night. Every night, Walter Cronkite would come on, and he'd say the news. He'd read the news. And he was the best that the United States has ever created.
Had a very precise way.
He was created.
What'd you say, Bert?
He was created.
Yes, he was.
Like a cardinal.
Created cardinal. Well, he would have been a cardinal. He had a very precise way of speaking. There was really no accent at all in what he said. And Bertie would do things like for the Apollo 13 moon mission, which went bad. You know, they had something blow up on the ship. And the question was, are these guys going to get back home? And it was not clear that they were going to get back home. And so, as far as I know, he stayed up for 3 days following this. And every time a piece of news would come in, he'd go down and say things like, we just heard from NASA that the oxygen tank is now at 25%. So he started off looking all, corporate and suit and tie. And by day 3, he's got a T-shirt on. But it didn't matter. So anyway, this has to do with why we speak the way we speak.
It would be interesting to see in documented cases of this whether the foreign accent is true to the actual country or culture it came from, or true to our perception of that accent, right? Because it's different. You have ways that you think somebody speaks, or you may sound like if you practice speaking like them, and that's not quite the same as the true accent of that culture.
Well, you're right. So are these people speaking as if they've truly inherited that part of an Italian brain, or a French brain, or a Japanese brain, or something, or are they just mimicking what they've heard somewhere in the past?
Right. So mimicking what they've heard in the past could imply that this is a part of their brain that's remembering something and applying it to them, right, to their speech pattern. Whereas a true accent of a specific area in a region they've never been to or listened to would be something they could not have pulled out of their own memories, and therefore maybe they're tapping into something else, something that is universal in how the brain works and people work and people function, sort of like that universal library we talk about, right? The memory is elsewhere, or the body is a conduit for it, and, maybe they opened a different chapter in a wrong book, and now they're emulating that story as opposed to something they've physically run into before.
I don't know, but I wonder if this lasts for the remainder of their life, or if it's a period of time, then they go back to speaking the way they normally speak.
Or if they get knocked upside the head again, they switch languages. Spanish. Oh, okay, we're good. And the next week,
Russian.
Russian.
You know that.
Well, it's like Fred Flintstone. I mean, the Flintstones are similar. The TV trope at the time was somebody gets, bang, knocked up the head, and they don't remember anything. And then the way you get their memories back is later on you have to be knocked up the head again.
But language is a very complicated. It's very complicated, and I have this colleague, and she's coming from the Ukraine, and well, she learned and Dutch and English, and we're helping Ukraine people. And what happened is that she translates for me, but she does it in English. And but then I give her an answer, and then she translated to the person in the Ukraine, and she starts talking Dutch to that person, and she didn't even realize it. Only after I'm saying, "Well, you're telling this in Dutch," and she said, "Oh, right," because the switching was very difficult for her.
Oh yeah, I've seen that same phenomenon. My wife and I, whenever we go to Japan, we'll be speaking in English, and then she will turn to, say, the waiter if we're at a restaurant, and she'll begin speaking in English to them, even though she knows she should be in Japanese. I'll have to remind her. She goes, "Oh yeah, that's right." Or if same thing, or she'll turn and start speaking in Mandarin Chinese to them, even though that's kind of a big no-no, and that's a whole nother can of worms I won't get into.
It's a big no-no because they don't want people speaking Chinese in Japan?
No, it's not so much that. It's the opposite. It's that there are still plenty of establishments in China that abhor Japanese and actually have signs out saying, no Japanese welcome here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because of the Sino-Japanese War.
The history of what happened in World War II.
Yep. In fact, when there was contention in the North China sea over a piece of land. I stood outside of a Japanese embassy and watched a silent protest in Japan, whereas in China, they were burning Japanese factories to the ground. So, very marked response.
Have you seen the test that they will do for people sometimes where, and there's a name for it, but I don't know the name. But you have to do these tests rapidly, and it'll be a blue dot, or it will be the word green shown in blue. And you're supposed to say either the color or the word, but people's brains get all mixed up. And they'll end up saying the color instead of the word or the word instead of the color. I know I do it. You know, if I have to concentrate very, very hard to give them exactly what they want, because my brain is keying, I guess, on the color rather than what the actual word says. Have you seen those?
Oh, yeah.
I have, yeah. Yeah, they're tricky.
Yeah, they're very, very tricky.
So it's so amazing.
There's also a game.
No, go ahead, Bert, please.
I remember there's also a game with this kind of cards.
Well, once again, to me, the reason I find it interesting is because what's exactly happening in my brain that keeps making me say the wrong thing?
I mean, the brain is amazing in what it can do, but it's very simple things can trip it up. For example, if you ever find yourself walking into another room and suddenly forgetting what you were there for, it's called the doorway effect.
And that happens to me all the time.
Yeah, and it's because of the fact that your brain segments reality into, very short little areas. And by changing your locale, by going through a doorway in particular, then your brain shifts context. And it's easy to forget what you're doing. But by contrast, it's a phenomenal way to try to establish something into longer term memory. By purposefully crossing doorways while studying, it can help to firmly embed whatever that is into your memory. It's kind of amazing.
I always thought it was because I was getting old and from years of taking medications for neck problems. But I like your explanation much, much better.
All right, so JJ, have you done studying where you're walking through doorways?
I have not. I actually, I purposefully avoid that because it is, especially when I'm studying language, it falls through my head, which is ironic considering that I'm a linguist, but it's the hardest thing that I have is to hold on to vocabulary in a real meaningful way without it quickly falling out. So I should be doing that, but I don't.
Well, anybody got any thoughts they want to bring up here?
Well, Bert, what do you think is happening in the situation with the foreign accent? What do you think is happening in the mind or the brain when that happens? Let's make an assumption. Let's make the assumption that it is not an accent the person has been exposed to. What would account for that in your experience?
If someone just started to talk in an accent of a foreign accent, which the person never heard before, but someone else knows well this is a Mandarin accent he is having, or some other accent, more exotic accent, I would have no clue as to why that would happen, and or because it reminds me as well as the persons, what you've told me, who have been possessed and talking in a complete different language. Mm-hmm. And it's the same question I always have: is it really spoken in that language with that it makes sense and that it is also the accent is correct, the dialect is correct, or is it the interpretation how someone perceived that language?
And that's interesting. The exorcist will record that and take it to a specialist, right, in that language, and that's often what they say is that's one of the diagnostic. They're speaking perfect Italian,
exactly,
perfect
exactly.
Ukrainian, or whatever language it is. It's not just bits and pieces they may have picked up or gobbledygook, right?
No. Because the poor girl in Germany, she spoke German, of course, and she was possessed by Hitler. And what was her name?
Wait! That was a pretty big jump. What would you got to give us a little more background?
She's that famous girl.
The name they used in a movie here was Emily Rose.
Yeah, but it was not her. It was
something, wasn't it?
Anneliese Michel or Michael.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And what I remember, there are tapes of that exorcism. And but she shouts in German and what I recall, not a foreign language.
Well, I mean. So she was a German shouting in German.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know quite a few German people, and they are very much like Americans. And some people are soft-spoken, and some people are not soft-spoken. And then you have guys like Hitler, and Hitler worked most of his life to try to figure out how to be really, really persuasive with his words. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are pictures of Hitler standing in front of a mirror, watching his face, and doing everything in the world he can to become the world's best orator. And I'm sure he did a really, really good job of that. I have heard one recording of Hitler's non-oration voice. And it's just a mundane conversation. It's something like, oh, what kind of soup are they serving today? or something like that. But it's a totally different voice.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure I could speak like Hitler. I don't think I could. Maybe with a year of practice, I could have that kind of, I don't know, very persuasive, almost yelling kind of speech he did.
Well, and you would have to watch hours and hours of video of him to try to get that down, right?
And the intonation.
It's just like English, right? I mean, look, you talked about hearing angry Cajun, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up in Southwest Virginia. I've got relatives that I know you would not understand what they said, right?
Right.
It is very, drawn out, very almost guttural in some cases, almost like they're swallowing words. They're said differently. Mm-hmm. If you weren't exposed to that accent, there's no way you'd be able to recreate it. I was exposed to it and I can't create it. I mean, I guess maybe if I was hit over the head and all of those memories were coalesced of all the speech I heard like that, perhaps I could recreate that. Do you see a way, Bert, for that to happen? Like, let's take that example. I've heard this accent for long periods of time in my childhood. Yeah. Could something happen to where I could now speak just like them? Something happen to my brain?
I think it could. Yes, it reminds me of what I told you earlier. There was this woman who spoke in a dialect all her life, but only in the end, after having a few years with dementia, she started to speak just plain Dutch. Mm-hmm. And I come from an area where they have a very strong dialect, but my mother comes from an area who has not this dialect. And I've learned to talk because of my mother. So I can imagine that being exposed that much to that dialect, that if I hope not, but if I get such an accident or get Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, I will start talking in that dialect. But then again, it's because you're exposed so many hours and so many.
It's the building blocks of that dialect are in your brain already.
Yes.
And with Alzheimer's, that makes sense because I've had family members with Alzheimer's, and there is a regression to when you're younger very often, right? Reliving those experiences, actually literally hallucinating what you went through in childhood.
And what you often see is that people start with able to speak Dutch and going back to the dialect of their youth.
Really? That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, but not so much going from the dialect they spoke all of their lives to plain Dutch. That's not what I've seen often.
Have you guys heard of Omm Seti?
I've heard of Seti.
Yeah.
Not. Would you say alms like
I'm sorry, OMMSETY. OMMSETY.
What is it?
Okay, Omm Seti was a British woman who, when she was 3 years old, she had a very, very serious head injury. They didn't think she was going to survive. I'm trying to find out what her real name was. Dorothy Eddy was her actual name. And she's one of these people who started talking about, I'm not in my real home. And I don't remember if she saw a movie or a newsreel or a magazine or something that showed pyramids and sphinxes and, various Egyptian things. And she said, that's my home. That's where I'm supposed to be. And insisted on this for years and years and years and years. And she would talk about things. She would say, she would see a temple in some kind of travel documentary. And she would say, they don't have that quite right. The burial grounds were to the west of the temple, about 50 meters away, and the gardens were to the east of the temple. And she was so accurate in the stuff she said that they finally got her to Egypt. And once she was there, she said, I'm no longer Dorothy Eddy, I'm Omm Seti, and this is where I'm going to stay. This is my home. This is where I came from. So in her mind, and look, this isn't the kind of thing where after a few years they just thought of her as the crazy lady who lived out by the who lived out by the Sphinx. They thought of her as an Egyptologist who knew more about what was happening there than anyone else. So,
and that goes in line with some of the discussions we've had on reincarnation.
On reincarnation.
Or universal intelligence.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
yes.
Possible.
If you're trying to be just totally materialist reductionist about that, I mean, could you say that, okay, something happened to her brain when she was a child, she looked through a lot of magazines that had pictures of Egypt, and she confabulated all of these different stories about Egypt. Well, yes, that could happen, but why would they have the degree of accuracy?
Well, I was going to say, that would assume that those old books were more accurate than current thought. And
Correct.
That's not usually the way it goes. You get more accurate as you learn more, not the other way around.
Right, you get more accurate as you go on. And I know she spent the rest of her life in Egypt and was considered a respected scholar of Egyptian history and Egyptology.
Well, universal intelligence. Talk about that, Bert. Lay it out.
It's an idea what I read it somewhere about tapping into the universal intelligence if you wanted to achieve something. And also the what is it called, the 100th Monkey Effect or something,
which is a paranormal topic paranormal rundown topic. Yeah,
it's on the list.
The 100th Monkey. My understanding is that, well, once an idea becomes disseminated among enough brains, an adequate number of brains, then that idea is everywhere. A part of that, I think, has to do simply with history. And the term I like is, when it's time to railroad, people will railroad. Mm-hmm. Okay, when you get a situation where you've got to move a bunch of stuff from one part of a country to another, where You know how to deal with metal. You know how to deal with energy. You know how to make steam, and you know how to contain all that. It's time to railroad. And I'm not sure where they actually came up with the term 100th monkey.
So it makes me wonder. So the woman who became Omm Seti, I love how the more of these episodes we have, the more these same concepts keep coming up and being connected.
They do.
So the episode with Father Wills, okay, with Father Bob, we talked a little bit about memories being passed down through DNA.
Yeah.
Right? So now the question would be, the woman who became Omm Seti, is it possible she was descendant from Omm Seti and there was a genetic memory that was passed down through DNA to her? And is that universal intelligence tapping into some DNA mechanism where you're understanding something from the past because of your relationship to it? Or is it something external to the body altogether that you're tapping into, sort of what I think is happening behind the scenes, right? Not the physical body, but the universal potential consciousness, the way the universal works.
And I have no way of telling you that.
Well, I'm very disappointed, Vic. I was looking to you for answers.
Well, it's recently that we more and more start to understand that the DNA, how it is affected by the external by external influences, but also from parent to child. So that if a person experienced something traumatic, it gives changes in the DNA, which is passed on to the next generation.
Wait,
and
really?
Yes.
Like
also
like Lamarckian evolution.
Well, I think more what I understand. I'm not a geneticist, so there's a big disclaimer.
What you're talking about is a mechanism where existing DNA can be changed such that it can be inherited by offspring.
Exactly, and we know about epigenetics, of course.
Yes.
That chunks of DNA can be turned off and on and off.
Right.
And I can imagine this is some sort of mechanism as well. But the idea that there is that between the body and the outside world, we see it as it stops with the skin, but it is more, how do you say, it's more osmotic, so to speak.
Okay, good word, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Where the genetic information of the human body can absorb information from the outside world.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's, of course, there's this thought that psychotherapy can induce this as well. It changes your behavioral patterns, how you deal with stress and such, and that can be reflected on the DNA as well. But the mechanisms are not that clear yet.
I find that astounding. I mean, I guess the image I've always had in my mind is that we are given a DNA information set. Mm-hmm. And that's going to give us things like how big our ears are, what color hair we have, how tall we are, how resistant we are to certain organisms, all kinds of physical things. But at the end of your life, that set of genetic information will be the same as it was at the beginning of your life. Your body will change because of injuries and exercise and nutrition and all of that. But there's not any difference in the genetics. But you're talking about a situation where that's not quite the case.
No. And most will be epigenetics. So the core of the DNA will not be changed, but some parts are turned on or off.
Oh, that's amazing.
For replication, for transcription into proteins and such.
Okay, so if there's the genetic part of me that gives me the superpower of speaking all languages instantly, I want to turn that one on. That's the
language man.
But what I've always wondered, this is the topic you brought up now, but because I wondered, you've spoken about your eidetic memory,
which is not fully eidetic. I'm not quite like Tesla, but
not quite.
Not but I can anything visual. I haven't. Well, I mean, Dave's seen it. You've seen me just bam.
It is.
But if you're
mine, we'll give it that.
So if you read something in Spanish with a translation beside it, it will be able to help you in learning Spanish.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's seeing full pages of text is challenging. I can do it. One thing I can tell you though is it's not absolutely permanent. If I look at a text, I can get it in there, and then for a day or two I can go back and actually read from that text. But it's like your brain has to make room for new stuff. So imagine that every page of text you've ever read in your life, which I bet by this time, Bert's pretty big. You've read a lot of books by this point in your life. And I guess it might be nice to be able to just, in your brain, go back and pull any of those pages up. And I understand there are people who can. But I don't think there are very many of them. And it seems like it would be an awfully crowded place in there. I'm also not as good at it as I was when I was 30. Which I hate.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, on the genetic alterations, we've heard so far the idea that a very intense event could alter the genetics to be passed down to an aversion to that event, right? And Father Mike actually pulled a biblical reference out of that to go along with it, and I forget the exact reference. But it's really interesting to me that you're saying that psychotherapy, which is not, maybe intense, but it's an over time type of thing you would think is a gradual change, not you have just one intense session and then you've altered your whole personality. Mm-hmm. So a gradual thing could do the same thing.
I think so. I think it has a lot to do with relationships as well. For example, you have this I don't know how to say this in English. You have this kind of therapy that you have in a group, and it's a representation of the family. You want a representation of the family.
Okay.
So one of the group members is the subject and will decide who plays her parents.
It's a role-playing kind of therapy.
Exactly. Only what happens is the people are assigned the roles. Mm-hmm. But in these relationships, during that time, they show behavior that is not common to them, but is common to the person who they are representing. But they didn't know that. So.
Oh, okay.
So there's also a lot of information passed unconsciously to another person.
Even somebody who didn't. You're talking about someone taking on the characteristics of someone they don't even know.
Yeah. Yes.
That's astounding.
Wow.
Yeah.
What? Obviously, people have observed this. They must have some speculation. I understand science can't tell you why something happens until there's tremendous research and you've gone through a lot of different hypotheses and eliminated them, but there's always speculation.
Yeah, and that's I think that there is a key in the relationships, because if you at least perhaps if you have siblings, parents, and you go out of the house and you have your own family, you behave in a certain way. But when you go back to your parental house and your siblings are there, then you're back into a certain kind of role and can behave such like.
I want to go back, if you don't mind, to just the whole idea of Lamarck. Okay, and so the idea of Darwinian Mendelian genetics is that we've got a whole bunch of trees out there and a whole bunch of giraffes. And at the beginning, all of the giraffes can get to leaves, but after a while, only the giraffes with longer necks can get to the leaves. And so they're the ones who survive, and they get together and they make baby giraffes, and they tend to have longer necks. And over time, you get longer and longer and longer necked giraffes.
Yes.
Not because of any physical change in the giraffe during their lifetime, just because of the genetics that they bring to the table. Now, in Lamarck, the idea is that you got a hungry giraffe, and you got trees over there with leaves on them, but they can't quite reach them. So these giraffes try real hard to stretch their necks as far as they can, and over time, that act of trying to stretch their necks changes their genetics. And then that can be passed on to the next generation. Now, Lamarck's pretty much not taught anymore and pretty much just been discredited. But the idea that you can permanently change someone's genetics is astounding to me. I'm thinking about, well, I read a study one time. I don't know how accurate it was. You know, things published for laymen are not always perfectly accurate.
But perhaps I was talking about the expression of the DNA, the epigenetic changes.
You're saying which parts become active and which parts are not active.
Exactly, and those changes are passed over.
Okay.
That's how not that you have complete chunks that the amino acids suddenly turn from one to another.
All right, so what you're talking about is the underlying grid of information stays the same.
Yes, it's the expression.
Right, we've got 1,000 boxes this way, 1,000 boxes this way.
Yeah,
giving us 1,000,000 boxes.
Yeah.
All of them are still there, but some are turned on and some are turned off. And at the end of your life, epigenetically, certain boxes can be turned back on, and that can be inherited.
Exactly.
Still pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So we don't have to be afraid that we are suddenly growing fins or something, but it's
right. The underlying information is whatever the underlying information is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I read a study one time that was talking about LSD, and my brain was just trying to come up with what exactly LSD, lysergic something acid. And what they were showing was people's in EEGs before and after taking LSD. And I don't know really how true this is, but the idea is that in certain ways an EEG is kind of like a fingerprint, that each brain will, under a state of health, essentially give you the same EEG from study to study. And that after taking LSD, the fundamental nature of the EEG had changed. Anybody read that particular study?
I didn't. No.
Doesn't surprise me, though. I've known people who have taken LSD. Not myself. I've stayed away from hallucinogenics, but I've known people who have, and they're, well, I won't say LSD. They've taken acid. It's not quite the same. I don't think it's the 100% same formula, but it's close.
What's the difference?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
Pure LSD back in the 60s was slightly different than what you find on the street today.
Okay. Probably has the street today probably has more fentanyl in it.
Well, no, God, I hope not. That would be it. But the common statement about that is they feel like they have been changed forever. They see the world in a way that they can never unsee. Not that they continue to experience the trip, right? The hallucinations, the feelings, but that there is a switch that's been flipped in their mind that allows for a slightly different view of things. And something that powerful and that persistent that, I mean, they feel lasts their entire life. It's not like it's, well, I feel like I saw things differently for a year or two. I mean, 30 years later, they still feel like they see things slightly different than they did before they ever took it. And I can see that translating into an EEG change.
Bert, is there any therapeutic use for LSD and similar drugs along those lines?
Well,
I don't know. I've never heard of one, but I don't know. I mean, I know there are a lot of, proponents of these drugs. What was his name? Timothy Leary?
well, some drugs can help against severe depressions and are being researched for those indications.
Like ketamine.
Exactly.
Well, think psilocybin. So have you ever dealt with psilocybin? And do they treat with that in Holland, Bert?
No.
Okay.
I've never.
At least we don't. I haven't treated, and it's not something common to treat.
It's not common here yet either, but it is being used in studies. And what you see, they're using it and testing it in two key cases. One is terminal patients. And what they see, you get cancer, you got 9 months, and you're terrified, right? And they'll do treatment with psilocybin, and you will see an acceptance and the anxiety gone. Now, I don't know if that's always the case. I'm just saying what I've read about it. And the patient is much more comfortable with their impending passing. And then the other is with PTSD. And that is where I think the real future of using psilocybin seems to be, is dealing with PTSD patients, and they are really, in some cases, a single session, turning around their PTSD and having a much better quality of life. Now, this is not me saying, hey, everybody with PTSD, go out and get some shrooms, okay? I'm not saying these are like controlled settings. They're with someone guiding them through the experience and very, very controlled dosing of it. So, and it's... I think it's been legalized at a local level in some places for these purposes. But that is something that where you're not talking about something that is strong and in effect as acid or LSD, but it is a hallucinogenic that is having some treatment effects.
Well, one of the things that always scares me about this is even commercially manufactured medications where you know exactly how much of substance X is in that capsule or in that pill. They can still have widely varying effects.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody's body's different.
With something like psilocybin, how do you have any idea even exactly what's in there?
It's a buckshot in the brain.
Say that one more time.
A buckshot in the brain.
A buckshot in the brain. The reason I wanted you to say it again was because you say it so beautifully. And, and it has that poetry, a buckshot in the brain. That's a perfect statement. In that you don't really have any idea what you're taking in. There are, well, one of the things we'd see in the ED these kids, they were kids, 14 to 20 years old. They would raid their parents' medicine cabinets. And they would bring whatever pills they found, and they'd put them in a big fishbowl. And the idea was that you reached into the fishbowl and just got a big old handful of pills and took whatever you got. So I was always thinking, gosh, they must be taking, everything from Enderall to...
Natural selection, I hear.
Yeah, this is very...
Yes.
Well, Bert, believe me, this was a perfect initial rundown topic in that we started talking about foreign accent syndrome, and we ended up talking about pill parties with fishbowls.
And before we leave the topic, I do want to say, Bert, if you have suggestions on how to do a session where you take on that other person's characteristics, I really want you to teach me how to be JJ so that I can understand all of these languages and his experiences. So if you just send me on a direct message, that'd be great.
I would not wish that upon my worst enemy. So,
well, I'm trying to figure out who I'd want to be. Anyway, okay. Are we all right moving to another topic?
yes, please.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, here we go. Hitting F9. Bum, 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 bum. Here we go. Topic 1, massive underground tunnel networks. Topic 2, angel divisions and angel choirs. Topic 3, the Thule Society. Topic 4, the Smiley Face Killers / group serial killers. Topic 5, prosperity ministries. Topic 6, science fiction tropes.
What was the second one, Vic?
It says angel divisions and angel choirs.
Okay.
I guess
I'm looking at JJ with that topic.
well, I figure anything that has the word angel in it, probably JJ wants to hop on that.
Yeah,
and
that would be
I always think
accurate. But I like
and
that
I think it's
one.
always a good idea.
I like Smiley Face Killers as well.
Well, since nobody here can talk about anything having to do with angelology as well as you can, why don't we talk about the angel divisions and the angel choirs? I find that pretty interesting.
Sure. So I can really only speak to the Hebrew Bible version of that, which is a heck of a lot more simplified than what you find in church histories, etc. But really, you have cherubim, seraphim, and archangels. And that's really about the division of it. You get like some other specialty jobs or roles, whether that is Hasatan, which is the chief prosecutor. It is absolutely not Satan. To the lying spirit of God, or the messenger of God.
Lion or lying?
Lying.
Okay.
And that is when God wanted to lead astray a sinful king and sends a lying spirit to say, yeah, go ahead and fight this war. Everything's just going to turn out
Everything's going to be dandy
peachy for you. Yeah. And only one prophet came up and said, no, don't believe that. And all of his other advisors were like, yeah, it's fine. We heard from God. You're good to go. But in the Christian New Testament, you find, 9 different levels of different types of angels, with archangels being at the very top. But yeah, that is essentially how angels are divided.
I have a question. It's from your earlier podcast, and it's a language thing. Seraphim comes from the stem Sarah.
Saraf.
If I understood. Sarah. And I wondered if the snake in paradise or in the Garden of Eden, does it have the same language or the same...
It does not. Yeah, it's an entirely different word that's used.
Okay, what kind of word is that?
It literally just means snake. There's no special significance to it.
Okay.
Whereas Saraf is... the verb literally means to burn.
Yeah.
Why does that word relate to angels? What was it that angels were burning? What was burning? Is that meant figuratively, literally? How is that meant?
It's been interpreted in many different ways throughout the years, but some people believe that they are casting reflections of God. Some believe that they burn because they are in the presence of God. There's a lot of different interpretations to that.
And the divisions of angels reminds me also about, I think it was the Kabbalah or something, and then there was something, a transformer-like name, like Metatron, on the top.
Fantastic name.
Yeah.
You find that in Third Enoch, and the Metatron is the top of the top of the top of the archangels.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so there are more. There are also divisions in the archangel group.
That is an interesting question.
Wait, before you get to that, can I jump in just a second?
No. Yes, of course.
In my mind, I guess I had naively thought that the head honcho angel, the top, TPMF IC, top angel in charge was Michael, he who is like God. The warrior of the angels, and I my thought was always that Metatron was thought of as the scribe of the angels.
You see, that's the thing. There are, there's really only 4 identifiable archangels within the Hebrew Bible, and however, because the number 7 is so important, it's later hypothesized that no, there are really 7. And then you'll find other random names ascribed to the other 3, but they always shift and morph.
Mm-hmm.
Michael should be the top, because that literally means who is like God. And really, it's Gabriel, the mighty warrior of God, who's the true warrior of the group. Mm-hmm. Even though Michael is the one who is shown to oppose Satan, or the enemy, however you want to name him, in all of its various forms and guises. But Metatron is, I don't remember, because I haven't read Third Enoch in a very long time. But isn't Metatron what Enoch becomes?
That's exactly what I had thought.
Yeah.
Was that Enoch was the man who walked with God, who was there and then was not there.
Yeah, he's the only person from the Hebrew Bible that it's never recorded that he actually died. That's all it says.
Right,
he
right.
walked with God.
Walked with God, and then so.
And that's why he became the ultimate apocryphal figure within the pseudepigrapha, where he becomes the voice piece of the Watchers and actually visits heaven and becomes an advocate, for God from the earth. It's rather remarkable. And then you've got, 3 total pseudepigraphal books that are devoted with him being the central figure to it all. So, you cannot underplay how important Enoch is as a figure in all of this. But then to have him assume not only just an angelic form, which if you take a reading from First Enoch to be serious, would be a serious sacrilege, because you cannot mix the mortal and the spirit, as we saw with the Nephilim. But then to have him become the ultimate angel that even stands above the other archangels, that is a whole nother level in and of itself. But then you also have to mix into, there were angels that, at least within Second Temple Judaism, they led each of the 70 nations. So there were 70 of these angels that were responsible. And of course, the angel that was over Israel was Israel.
Kind of makes sense.
And then Israel becomes an extremely important figure as well because of his statue as leading the nation. But the ones that I find the most interesting are the inverse angels, the names which that are either sacrilegious or are plays upon angel names. So, you have a standard pattern. You have a verb or a noun, and then El, which designates God, which is short for Elohim. Mm-hmm. So, Gaber El. You have Samael, the gall or the poison of God, which I just love that name beyond all belief. And then you have...
I do too. I mean, that's for someone raised pretty much exclusively in a Christian environment, that's a very strange concept.
Oh, absolutely. But then you have the other one, which is my favorite name that people love to mispronounce, Azazel.
Azazel. Yeah, it's like good old Azzy.
Because the name, that ending part is L. It's not your standard Aleph Lameth. It is Ayin Lameth. And so it becomes almost a parody of God's name in and of itself through folk etymology. And it's just always been near and dear to my heart. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, that's why in First Enoch, even though he did not lead the Watchers, he was only a chief of 10, he becomes the one in which they say, ascribe to him all sin. And he becomes the ultimate bad guy in First Enoch. Mm-hmm. Where it should have been Semachas, who led all of the Watchers. But no, his crimes were a pittance in conjunction in comparison to Azazel.
Oh, I got you saying it.
Yeah,
sorry, JJ.
I was like, I wanted to smack my own forehead there for a second. Like, oh my gosh.
So, do you think that the story there on Enoch to Metatron? Are there any other examples of someone becoming angelic, becoming an angel in the Apocrypha, or?
Not in the Not in the pseudepigrapha.
I'm sorry,
Not to my-
pseudepigrapha. I said it wrong.
The pseudepigrapha,
Yeah.
right?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So, do you think that is where the concept that I know there's an official, I think, heresy for it or something where people can advance to the point of becoming angels?
You find those kind of concepts more often in Gnosticism than you do in anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you have the right magic, then yeah, you can do essentially anything that you want to do. And it had to have been not the strangest of ideas if it wormed its way into a text which some people considered holy, and if you're a part of the Ethiopic Orthodox Church, you still consider holy.
Cool. Bert, I know you can't speak on specific people in your practice over the years. I don't want you to do that. But have you run across people who have had interactions with angels, said they've had interactions with angels, and how do you handle that when you run into something like that?
Well, most of the time they're not interacting with fallen angels. That's something is a bit more common, unfortunately,
Right?
Because of the dreaded things they encounter or the thoughts they get. I've once treated this girl who was convinced that she was evil, and she was. She was a sort of demon, and
May I ask you a question before? I don't want to break your chain of thought, but on this, was there anything objectively that a regular person would consider evil about her?
no,
Okay.
no, not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
No, she was
Normal person.
a normal person, early 20s, and what you did see is the stages of schizophrenia, how it is expressed. There was a period in which she was getting more. She got more on herself and was getting more difficulties maintaining her contacts and becoming more paranoid to a stage that she wanted. She no longer wanted to live because she thought she was so evil.
So just further, would you say further decompensation? I mean, just every day she's getting further away from the normal person she might be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And hearing this voice that she was evil. So there were these acoustic hallucinations. Mm-hmm. And it always saddens me because she was what I've heard from her family. She was a very bright girl, and she had become just a shadow of what she was. Well, fortunately, the medication helped relieve the symptoms.
Good.
So,
well, I just know I know quite a few people over time, especially with more modern New Age type beliefs, or very loosely Christian beliefs with a New Age slant, who have not in the. I mean, I know Catholics have the concept of a guardian angel, but this is a little bit more than that, right? They're speaking to their guides. They're speaking to angels. Angels are guiding them. Things that happen in their environment. These are positive things, right? This is not negative. Are happening in their environment that they attribute to an angelic being, and I know that's That's not that uncommon of a belief or experience.
Oh, in fact, on
No, but
TikTok right now, there is a stitch that's going around where a woman asked, "Tell me how you know that God is real." And I don't mean some kind of universal energy. And it's all of these people that are sharing their experiences. And the vast majority of those have to deal with angels in some way, shape, or form. Like one woman was saying that she was on a very busy interstate. She tried to merge. Another car was there, hit her rear bumper and spun her out on the interstate, and she hit one of the side walls and came to a stop. And instantly there was a man who was there who set out road flares for her and like briefed out all the emergency people that came on to the scene, the police officers, etc. And then she was asking people when she got into the emergency room, the police officer who was there, who was this pastor who was suddenly at my door? And he's like, there was nobody else there. And there's a lot of these stories, and there are
a lot of these stories.
and they're fascinating. I mean, some of them can be easily explained away of, trauma or head issues or memory lapses. Some of them are not. And if you take them on face value, whether you fully believe them or not, they leave you with such a positive glow that you want to believe them.
And I think that the reason why I do not speak a lot to people who have these positive effects is because they are not suffering from it.
Right.
That's a good point.
Well, I did have a patient, and I actually remember her name, but I think Bert and I have decided that every patient we refer to will be Mrs. Johnson, or Jansen, I guess, if you're doing it in Dutch, simply because that way I don't slip up and use somebody's real name. She was toward the end of her life, last 6 months of her life, but it was uncertain as to exactly how long she was going to live because she was responding somewhat to treatment. And she would tell me every time I would talk to her. And she wasn't schizophrenic. She did not have disordered thinking in any way. She was somewhat frightened of the idea of death. But she was very lucid and very with it. And she would just tell me, well, there's my angel right up there. And she would point to the exact same place in the room every single time, which is up in one of the corners of the room. And she would say things like, I can tell how I'm doing by the color of the angel's hair. And so when the angel would have bright blondish hair, she was doing well. When the color of the angel's hair would get darker, she realized she was sicker. Now, she talked about this angel in the corner of the room communicating other things to her. I never saw anything in the corner, but I guarantee you she was seeing something there. And if this was simply a hallucination, it was kind of a beneficial hallucination for her because it brought her great comfort. And she would say things such as, my angel has told me that, if once the treatment stops, once I can no longer recover, that they are here instantly for me when I die. I never knew what to say to her. I just would talk. Well, I think that's great. I wish everybody on the floor had an angel that was following them around. But her experience was extremely positive. Has anybody here watched and JJ, I want to take this back into the mundane. This is non-Harvard stuff. The Supernatural TV show?
Oh, yes.
Okay, remember Metatron and the Supernatural TV show?
Yeah, he was a weasel.
He's an absolute weasel.
I never made it past the first season of Supernatural.
It gets so much better after the first season. The first season is your typical horror tropes, right? Every episode was typical folk tale about, horror story. When they get into the long-term story arcs, it gets much more interesting.
Okay, I might have to pick it back up again.
Well, anyway, Metatron is played by the guy who played Booger in Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh, really? I love that character.
And Bert's looking at us like, what the hell are they talking about?
Bert, have you seen the TV show Supernatural?
No, I haven't. I'm missing something here. I understand.
It is a cultural phenomena. They've got 16 or 17 seasons. And these are long seasons, right?
15 seasons.
15, okay. I'm at 13. I haven't finished it.
Right. It's got 15 seasons, and
it's on a streaming.
Oh yeah, you can stream it all on
somewhere.
Netflix.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure it's streaming somewhere. And look, it's very much like a lot of these other shows. I mean, they've got the Monster of the Week episodes. Where this week we're fighting a pish taco, which is a Peruvian kind of monster that sucks fat out of people. Okay, but next week we're going to be back to the story for the season, where we're fighting the Eve, the mother of all monsters, or something like that. But it's ridiculously entertaining.
Yeah,
at least I found it so.
Absolutely.
The only season I found terrible was the Leviathan season.
The Leviathan storyline was tough, but it had its moments. The head guy was a really good bad dude.
He was a really
totally
good bad
corporate, guy. Totally corporate evil. It was great.
But so, Bert, are there any Dutch equivalents to shows like Supernatural? These monster shows that people watch every week.
I don't think we have the budget for something like that.
You know what? I do have to say that I think a lot of I actually began prepping for Southern Demonology unknowingly in grad school because of the X-Files.
Oh.
And it's because of the fact that they would have some biblical reference that they would allude to, and I would rip it to shreds. And I would have friends actually call me over, let's watch X-Files, and now you dissect it for us. And
you just said, okay, so that became the ritual.
And I loved it.
That'd be fun.
Oh, I loved it so much. Yeah.
That would be fun.
I took time. They did a second little series, right? A more modern take on it with the original characters, Mulder and Scully. This is I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or something. And so
same actors? Or
yeah, same actors. Same actors.
Okay.
It was like the story later, right? And so I went back and watched the original end to end. And some of the episodes held that same mystique that I enjoyed, but it really was disappointing. My memories of it were so much better than the show really was. And I guess it was my age at the time and the newness of it, and I guess most series are like that. In retrospect, there's always faults with them, but they really did not do a great job of turning it into a whole brand. I think that was the idea. They were going to start a whole brand new show, and it was disappointing because there's so much fodder out there. I mean, they would absolutely have an episode about the mall in Miami, right?
Oh, man, for sure. Yeah. So the question I've got real quickly, has South Park done the Mall of Miami yet?
Oh, I don't know. I don't watch South Park anymore, but they definitely should.
They definitely should.
If anyone would have a good take on it, they absolutely would.
South Park would be able to do a good take on it. Look, my wife and I, one of our rituals is that we will we'll find a TV show that we can watch together. You know, because we're both busy and we often don't have time to watch a whole movie or, you know, but we can generally set aside an hour to sit together on the couch and watch a TV show and talk about it.
My wife and I do the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just kind of a bonding thing, and it's fun. You know, the next day when you're getting ready for work, you know, you're talking about, what do you think about that Indian guy on Downton Abbey? I wonder if. You know? And so what we're watching right now is the X-Files, and we're still in season 1, but we've watched both Battlestar Galacticas. And there's a British TV show about monsters coming through, or dinosaurs coming through.
Oh yeah,
portals.
Primeval. Great
Primeval.
show. Great show.
We've watched all these shows. British. We watched a bizarre show from Lars Van Trier. It was called The Kingdom, and it was about this huge hospital somewhere in, I think, Norway, where all this weird paranormal stuff was going on.
Is it the Kingdom Hospital from Stephen King?
Yes, Kingdom Hospital. But they had made a TV show about it. And, man, that's a weird show.
Yeah.
But
You seen that one, Bert?
I've seen it, but quite a long time ago. And I thought Stephen King had also something.
I think it was I think the original stories were written by Stephen King, and they may have made an American miniseries or series or movie about it. But the one that I saw was Finland or Norway, one of the Scandinavian countries.
I've seen the American version now.
What did you think about it?
I think what I remember, it was fun to see, and it was weird, and but the atmosphere was quite good.
The episode I remember most in the Kingdom Hospital one was, there's this woman she's pregnant, and she is pregnant from something other than a human. And she's wanting to, so trigger warning time. She's wanting to terminate this pregnancy. And she ends up giving birth to this demon infant thing. And so within a day or two, it's like 11 feet tall, and is able to speak like an adult, but has the emotional makeup of an infant. Just
Supernatural did the same storyline.
It's like what's his name? Twin Peaks. David Lynch on steroids. Just incredibly weird.
Actually, have y'all ever seen the British comedy Gareth Marenghi's Dark Place?
No. Oh. Tell us about it.
Oh my God. It goes way overboard, like more than half the time, but it is hilarious. If you ever enjoyed what's the other British comedy that's really famous? IT Crowd. If you enjoy the nerdy guy on there, then he plays like the head of the hospital in this series, and it's all about this guy who's playing an actor who thinks that he is the greatest screenwriter, author, actor in the entire world, and produces this truly horrible, mediocre TV series that's set in a hospital where all the strange things in the world happen to be, and yet only he can save everybody. It's actually really funny. I enjoyed the heck out of it.
This is great. So I have new paranormal hospital shows to watch: The Kingdom and Dark
Place.
Awesome.
Okay. Think we got time for one more topic?
Yeah, I'm good for one more.
Okay. All right, hitting F9. Bum, 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 bum. I got to do the little bum, 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 or I don't feel like I'm doing my job. So
that's why we pay you the big bucks.
All right, let's see here. Okay. First topic is the immortality of the soul. Second topic is Polybius. Who knows about Polybius? Okay. Third topic is Genie and other children raised without language. Number 4 is the Beast of Gévaudan. Number 5 is infernal name Melek Taus, or I guess any infernal names. And number 6 is the death of Ken Rex McElroy.
I don't like any of those, but
I was
that's
going to say, maybe pull another one.
Maybe pull another one.
or
When
we,
you got 23, go ahead.
or we could go back to Smiley Face Killers.
Okay, Smiley Face Killers it is. What do you guys know about Smiley Face Killers? I have very minimal knowledge.
There is this horror movie coming out somewhere this year called Smile.
Yeah, that was here last year. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, it's
awful.
No,
Absolutely.
I don't know.
It sounded.
I'm not going to go with JJ. It's not awful. It's only 0.8 awful.
So it's awful-ish.
It's awful-ish, yeah.
And you made a topic out of it, right?
But
Well,
anyway, the Smiley Face Killers, it is this hypothetical group, because what will happen is there will be a murder and all of these different locations, and then there will be a smiley face painted somewhere. And people have come to the weird belief that there must be a group of these people that are working in cahoots with each other, and that is their calling sign. Even though the graffiti is random, they do not look alike. They share a very common piece of symbology that you find everywhere. Nowadays. But yet it has led to this belief and some an utter conviction that there is this group of people out there that are murdering people and leaving their calling card, Joker style.
Well, do you remember Val Zavala?
Yes.
Talking about taking on a case that had been forgotten, a mysterious murder from the past. And his job was to try to, it was like the last thing he wanted to do as a policeman was to find out who had killed a certain person. Well, this isn't so uncommon, I'm finding. There are a lot of long-term police detective kind of people who kind of as a last effort want to solve some old crime. There are 5 or 6 guys like that who've taken on the Smiley Face Killers, and they're convinced that they are dealing with a real phenomenon, not just a socially developed phenomenon.
Good for them.
Which makes me feel like, look, guys like Val are not easily fooled. You know, they're not. I mean, they have spent their entire life dealing with people lying to them, and they learn quickly how to detect these people. So I think, JJ, I mean, just from that one piece of evidence, I think there probably is something to it. But the whole idea of these hidden cabals, these hidden groups of people doing something horrible, first off, it's a really powerful fiction idea.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, it's a really powerful fiction idea. A little harder to figure out how it might really work in the real world.
Yeah, but just to be completely honest, I mean, I have zero inside knowledge. I'm not one of these people so I can't speak from any position of authority on it. In fact, my entire, corpus of knowledge on the topic comes from random internet videos that I've seen on it. But at least when it comes to the graffiti, I can say that I have seen several of the examples, and if they were in any way, shape, or form uniform, I would say, maybe there's something there, but they're so different and completely random than each other. And the fact that there is just an innate need that drives people to leave any kind of mark, whether it's their name or figuratively upon a place. That graffiti is one of the most common things that you have found, not just in the present day with the advent of, spray paint, but throughout history. I mean, one of the most common things is you will find some random name engraved in stone. And this is a documented phenomenon that has always been around.
Are there a lot of Smiley's graffiti in the US?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of graffiti of all kinds in the US.
Okay, so it could also be a stoplight killer. I mean, there's loads of Smiley graffiti in the US.
Yeah, anywhere you go to any... Most of these people seem to drown. Is that correct, Bert? I mean, JJ, these are mostly drownings they're talking about. It's a college kid goes to a bar. A college fraternity guy goes to a bar, gets drunk with his buddies, leaves, walks down the street. There's some kind of river or stream or something close by. He ends up dead in the river. And then they will find the smiley faces around that area.
So it's not just the graffiti, you're also talking a similarity in method.
Similarity in method, and the similarity in method is drunk college guys.
But drowning.
But drowning. Yeah. And JJ's looking very quizzical, like I'm talking about a different case or something, or...
That doesn't ring any bells. Like the ones that are flashing through my brain, and I could be conflating the two. I'm not saying I'm not, but the ones I had found were underneath a bridge, and it was just a bypass that they had found bodies in random locations. But yeah, I could be wrong.
Well,
you have to be able to distinguish the relationship and causality if they are truly connected to each other.
Well, the two people, the policemen who were trying to investigate this, they were named Gannon and Duarte. And I'm just going to do Wikipedia for a second. The Smiley Face murder theory, also known as the Smiley Face murders, Smiley Face killings, and Smiley Face gang, is a theory advanced by retired New York City detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, as well as Dr. Lee Gilbertson, a criminal justice professor and gang expert at St. Cloud State University. It alleges that 45 young men found dead in bodies of water across several Midwestern American states from the late 1990s to the 2010s did not accidentally drown, as concluded by law enforcement agencies, but were victims of a serial killer or killers. The term smiley face became connected to the alleged murders when it was made public that the police discovered graffiti depicting a smiley face near locations where they think the killer dumped the bodies in at least a dozen of the cases. Gannon wrote a textbook case study on the subject titled Case Studies in Drowning Forensics. The response of law enforcement investigators and other experts has been largely skeptical. So yeah, they were drowning.
So I'm looking at a site. It's actually on the Rolling Stone, and it talks about cases beyond what Gannon, Duarte, and Gilbertson did. Mm-hmm. where they're dealing with young men drownings. They're tying this with a gang targeting the young men, a specific gang, and they're giving examples of, there's 6 different examples of the smiley face here, and they're all slightly different, right? They're, they're obviously, well, they don't appear to be by the same hand.
Well, it's not like they have a template or anything.
Yeah, but it's, there's a smile. Only one of them is really different in that it's got a demon head sort of around it with horns. The rest of them are just a smiley face. If you're dealing with something that is spanning a wide area and with different characteristics over a long period of time, it makes you wonder about, murder cults type things. Where, what was the name of that show? There was a show that that Laura and I watched. I only got through about half of the second season because it was just so dark, and it had Kevin Bacon in it. And he was the cop or FBI agent who was trying to take down this murderer. And this guy, even from prison, developed through letters and, created this network of people who their goal was to murder. And they didn't care if they died in the end. They just wanted to take lives. And, it was an elaborate conspiracy. But I guess you got to wonder if you get enough people with the internet and the dark web and other ways to communicate that aren't readily observable, I don't see why you couldn't have people that find each other online in various places that have similar purpose.
Look, that's the thing that my brain always trips on. Okay, there are times in my life I'd really like to have people to talk to about something, but I'd like to be talking about microphones or Canon cameras or, how to do proper slow motion video or, 100 other things. I don't want to talk to anybody about how to kill somebody. That's not up there in those topics.
Yeah, but all it takes is a message board where one person who is committed to this finds a similar soul, right? And then it becomes recruitment, right? You think about the episode with Josh, where he was talking about the coven that was basically recruiting him, right?
They're at the college.
They were actively trying to find a new member, right? And they were scouting out people. Well, you would scout out people online too. And as long as you could do it in a way that, and this is where the dark web would come into play, in a way that they could never truly get back to you, you could deal with the law enforcement element maybe and keep from getting caught. But I don't know.
People can really it reminds me, and it's perhaps a bit dark this, but it reminds me what happened years ago in Germany, where 2 men contacted each other on the internet, and one of them really wanted to know how human flesh tasted like and wanted to eat, and the other had this perverted idea of that sounds like a good idea, I want to be
to be eaten.
And they met up, and one man did not survive, and the other is in prison now. But I think if you have, and that's about relationships, it's you can push someone over an edge, and I think with the internet it's easier, because you you don't see each other. It's more anonymous, and look how we as an internet faring people treat each other on these forums.
Oh, horrible!
So it's actually, I think if we were still living in a small community, and we know each other, and we suppress some of our darkest urges, perhaps. And I think we all have darkness inside of us somewhere. I'm not.
What's the term? The shadow. We all have a shadow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this internet with the in some cases can bring out the worst in us. And I think that and that, well, it shifts a bit about. I can imagine that if you are on the internet, you have these gangs and anonymous. You're fighting each other on the internet and about perhaps drugs or weapons or I don't know what, and that this is also a new way of liquidations, to bring it back to these smiley killers.
Well, JJ, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but there is a Smiley Face Killer movie.
Oh, gosh.
Which just seems to me to have your name on it for like a Wednesday night movie night. We should be watching the Smiley Face Killer movie.
We've certainly watched worse movies.
I mean,
so why not?
We definitely need to have that. Look, I know somebody who has surfed the dark web specifically looking for satanic child abusers who are willing to talk about being satanic child abusers. Dave, you know this person too.
Yes. And it is disturbing how easy it is to make those connections.
Correct. He talks about just within minutes being able to contact people who, at least in that environment, are claiming to be satanic child abusers.
Right.
Now, are they really? My feeling is always that most of these guys are probably 14-year-old virgins in their mother's basement who don't have the guts to even go across the street and get into a fight. But not all of them are.
Well, when you're talking about the dark web, it's another level beyond just going out on Facebook or Twitter or whatever and trolling, right?
Yes, it is.
You're much more motivated to go that far and find your way around it and find your way into groups. So I think that weeds out a lot of the teenagers who are just looking for getting a rise out of other people or whatever. I think you are already in a group that's much more serious.
I was, and I've told this story a number of times, but it's a true story, and it showed me how vulnerable I am, or anybody is. Coral Eugene Watts. Some places call him Coral, Coral. Some places call him Carl. Was a serial killer in Texas. One of these guys who apparently, depending on the story you listen to, killed anywhere from 30 to 160 people. My feeling is that once these guys are caught, they decide, well, I might as well make myself look as badass as I can. So,
right.
So I didn't kill 5 people. I killed 320 people. But the day he was caught, he had broken into the apartment above me, above my apartment. And things went south for him. He wasn't able to do the killing he wanted to do. He ended up jumping out of the balcony, going through the window, waking me up because I was working 11 to 7. And they caught him just there in that apartment complex a few minutes later. but they are out there. And I've always wondered, gosh, what if you decided you wanted to go to the downstairs apartment instead of the upstairs apartment? Now, I think he was looking for a female, and I wasn't female, but you feel extremely vulnerable when that kind of thing happens.
Yes.
And I can remember a guy that I talked to at Bert. I did a contract with Huntsville Prison, which is north of Houston, and it is where the Texas death row is. That's where they had the worst of the worst. And my job was to stay inside a cage with a policeman there and give medications and talk to people about little minor injuries and things like that they had. If they had anything worse, we were supposed to call an ambulance and get them out of there. But the rule was that you really were just supposed to talk to them about the medication they needed to get. You weren't supposed to engage them with any, but they would engage you. They would just talk to you while you were going along. And I remember this one guy saying, yeah, I'd go around the neighborhoods and I'd jiggle the doors. I figured that if the door wasn't locked, that was an invitation to come in and do whatever I wanted to do. So in his mind, just the fact that the door was unlocked was enough for him to decide that was a family that decided they wished to be killed.
Which is why you always lock your doors.
This is why you always lock your doors. But he was a very unhealthy kind of guy.
The episode, the series that I was talking about was The Following. So
yeah, that's the serial killer who kind of is able to get followers from prison, right?
Yes, and I found it extremely disturbing. So if you want a very disturbing, dark series, check it out. The acting in it's great. The series is done well. I couldn't keep watching it. It was just too,
too painful.
It was just
or too bad.
It placed so little value on life.
Oh, really?
Right. I mean, these people murdered as if it was a game.
Oh, okay.
And it was always to put the police officer in the situation where he thought he was going to be able to control it, but in the end he couldn't. And all these people wound up dead. And they just didn't think anything of it, right? It was just part of the game. It was part of the adventure. And so I had to, like I say, it was dark.
Well, I think the number of human minds that are that nihilistic is pretty small.
I certainly hope so.
God.
Yes.
Bert, is there anything that you would find enjoyable to close the show out with? Just anything you've thought about? Because I know you think deeply about things.
And I want to know if you've had any paranormal experiences yourself.
He's told us about one, but it's a pretty standard kind of thing. But
well, of course, I've told you the one with JJ, I think, and to you, Victor, and well. And I don't know if this is really paranormal, but I had this period that I had a lot of deja vus. And they say, of course, that it is because how your brain processes memory. Mm-hmm. But my experience, that's an N is one, but my experience is I had this deja vu, and I was dressing. I was somewhere I was in the jungle in Ecuador at that time, and
You were in the jungle in Ecuador.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And I had this feeling of deja vu. And I thought, well, if I turn my head down, because I was lacing my shoes or something, if I turn around and look, I will see this man looking at me. And I did just that. And it was as if I had already seen it. And that happened a few times during my life. And it was completely random.
Were you in the jungle as a tourist, as a doctor? Why were you there?
As a tourist.
Okay.
Yes. It was.
Well, that's a pretty fascinating place to be, anyway.
Yes. And
it's not like that particular deja vu gave you any life-changing information. I mean,
no.
Pretty mundane kind of situation.
Yeah, and that's actually with the deja vu I had. They are completely random and it could be about everything, nothing life changing.
Well, I don't think that makes it any less important.
I don't either.
I mean, I don't think it makes it any less important. I think I've read a lot of different ideas about deja vu. One is that there are periods of time when the two hemispheres of the brain get out of sync a little bit. Okay, and left hemisphere has already experienced this and processed it, and right hemisphere is lagging behind by a few milliseconds or whatever. And then when right hemisphere realizes that oh, I'm processing this, left hemisphere says, hey, I've already done this, sorry you're behind. And that's part of the feeling of deja vu. And I can see that happening. I mean, human bodies are messy, squishy, smelly.
Okay, well, let's take that one, though, before you go to the next one. So in your situation, Bert, you felt like there was going to be somebody behind you staring at you or looking at you.
Yes.
How long do you figure it was before you turned around? You had that feeling, you turned around. Are we talking 2 or 3 seconds? Did you pause for like 10 seconds and think about it and turn around? Because that has to be more than milliseconds, right?
Yes, it was more than milliseconds. And that makes it that a deja vu, the idea that out of sync and memory planting, yes, it could be possible, but not if I first had to turn around and then I saw the picture, then turn around and see the picture. That does not make sense.
You see, what I find fascinating about this, Bert, is, look, I don't place this in the category of being meaningless. I think there's a great deal of meaning to these kind of experiences. I don't know what that meaning is, but I think probably most people have these kind of experiences throughout their lives.
Oh, I've had them.
And they just, for some reason, decide that's not particularly important. I don't need to worry about that. And I understand that, because it's hard to figure out exactly what's happening. It's hard to figure out what the utility of it is. But still, I think that is probably one of the more common ways that people encounter what one might call the paranormal.
And I've had them when I was younger. I had them much more frequently, and some of them were long lasting. Like, we're not talking a 30-second period, like, minutes of something. What I'm going through is something that I have been through before. Maybe up to 15, 20 minutes. When they were happening more frequently, they seemed to get longer and longer as they happened. And you have to wonder if it is tied in some way with the idea of synchronicities, right? Where people experience things that aren't things that they've been through before, but that are the exact perfect thing to happen at that moment to get you, like the likelihood of things coming together like that are so unlikely. Whether it is an event that is, well, if these 3 or 4 things didn't happen, I would have stepped out and gotten hit by that bus, or whether it's something, you're on a spiritual journey and then all of a sudden certain things start popping up into your life that perfectly match that journey you're on. And there are times where you have synchronicities where you're like, you get a feeling where it was meant to happen. Like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I can feel it. It's not as much a deja vu, but it's a feeling of rightness with that moment. And you kind of wonder if it's all kind of related.
Well, I love it when I have a feeling of deja vu.
Me too.
I mean, to me, it's just kind of a little frisson of excitement, and I try to focus on it. Why am I feeling this right at this moment? And the truth is, it doesn't happen to me very much. But when it does, I get a real kick out of it.
It doesn't happen to me at all now. But when I was a kid, it would come in 2 different varieties. I would either have dreamt something in black and white, and then when it happened, I knew that I had dreamed about it. Or it would be something, and it never lasted long. It was only ever a few seconds in length. But that same feeling of deja vu would hit me moment to moment to moment to moment. And they could be years apart from each other, and yet I would recall the previous moment I had deja vu around the same thing. And yeah, it was always very eerie to me.
So I have 2 comments on that. The first one is, given your dreams, it's terrifying for me to think that something in your dreams came real.
Oh, these were very tame and mundane actions. I think the worst one is that, like, whenever I dreamed about myself, it was always in this idealized image of myself rather than how I actually look. But
okay, what is the idealized JJ? You mean 6'7", jet black hair?
No. I mean,
James Bond build.
These were all when I was a kid, but skinny, blonde-haired kid was the idealized version. And I was born when I was born, I had blonde hair, which then turned black over the years as I got older. But yeah, for some reason, I still pictured myself as blonde in these dreams. And the worst one that ever happened was falling into a giant planter that had a huge cactus plant in it.
That's right.
That's right. You told us about
I remember that. Mm-hmm. So the second comment... go ahead, Bert. Did you have a...
No.
Well, the second comment is you're talking about this moment where you experience a deja vu and you immediately remember the last time you experienced a deja vu. So they're sort of tied together, right? Am I describing that accurately?
I did a bad job in explaining it. It would be, for example, let's say that I was looking across the field to my great aunt's house, and it was nighttime, and I would see a light on in their window, which was a common occurrence. And I would think, and a feeling a deja vu hit. And if I was doing the same thing again, even a few years later, that I would have it would be the same action I was doing, and then it would spark that same feeling of deja vu. And this happened over and over and over again, not bound by time, but rather by the same or similar action.
And when you would experience it, would you then remember that you had experienced the deja vu part of it before?
Oh, yeah. I'd be like, oh, this is like the 20th time I've had this feeling of deja vu around the same exact thing.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ask about, because it reminds me of, we've talked about dreams. We did an episode on ending the curse about dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned when I'm falling asleep, right before I fall asleep, as my brain sort of calms down, I start remembering the dreams I had the night before. Or I'll remember previous dreams that I've had and scenarios where I was in. And it's like my brain reaches I don't know if it is a brain wave or a chemical balance or what, but it's like it reaches a point to where, I can remember dreams now. And so I can look back at my catalog of dreams and see things about them. I'm in that mental state.
That's an awesome thing to be able to do.
Oh, God, I'm glad I don't have that ability.
Yes.
You also have the ability to do lucid dreaming.
I wish.
Can you do that, Bert? Can you lucid dream?
I've had some lucid dreams, yes.
I don't think I've
and
ever
they were awesome. And because it was, for example, I was dreaming about looking in the mirror, and I realized I'm dreaming. This is a dream, and I was near a window, and I was curious, how detailed is this dream of mine? So I went to the window and looked at the windowsill. And I saw the wood and where it touched the glass, and there were a bit of mold. The details,
wow.
It was amazing.
Now, did you change any of it? Have you been able to lucid dream where you change what's happening, guide what's happening?
Once I had there was a lucid flying dream that
that'd be even cooler.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think when I'm lucid dreaming, I'm also, I think, nearing the stage in which I wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so I'm. So the lucid dreams that I have are not that long, unfortunately.
Bert, I will hear people say things like, there are two things I'd like to talk about quickly. And I know people probably want to go, but I'd like to talk about these things. When I go to sleep, I love the process of going to sleep. Okay. I don't particularly care about being asleep, but that process of going to sleep. Once my body relaxes and once I'm, kind of on that downward slide, I hear a cacophony of voices in my head. And this has always been the case. I'll hear like commercials I heard that day, radio songs, conversations I had a month before, voices that I have no idea who they are or what they are. But there'll just be this, it's like I'm standing in a room where all these people are talking around me and I'm trying to pick out snippets of conversation between them. And Dylan Thomas talks about it. And he wrote a book called, or a poem called A Child's Christmas in Wales. And what he's talking about is the voices I sometimes hear in my head right before I go to sleep. So obviously I'm not the only person who has that happen. But
I think Bert can probably schedule an appointment for you to deal with those voices in your head, Vic. It's okay.
I don't want them to go away. I would be very sad if they went away. It's a truly entertaining thing to hear these voices. If you know any thoughts about that, or
well,
you can say he's weird. It's okay. We do all the time.
I know I'm weird.
Well, it's falling asleep. I can relate to that. Not that I'm hearing voices when I'm falling asleep. The sometimes songs, yes,
yeah,
and but it is like floating on when you're lying on your bed, floating in the sea. You're being carried by. Yes, it's and your mind frees itself from the mundane, perhaps, and it lets itself go.
Lets itself wander.
Yes, like a ship, and then it floats into the sea of dreams. I don't know, but
I mean, it's not like I can say the voices are saying anything brilliant. It's not like somebody's telling me, the answer to the mystery of Fermat's last theorem is. No, it's nothing like that.
No.
It's just things like, have you had your Wheaties today? And
do you ever ask them questions?
No, I never do.
Okay.
It's just
listening.
It really is just entertainment. It's
Yeah.
just, I'm going to lie here and just listen to whatever these voices have to say.
And what is the next phase in your falling asleep?
Being asleep.
Okay, there's nothing.
Yeah,
it's just you hear the voices and drift away.
I generally go to sleep very quickly. I mean, I'm lucky in that I bet you sometimes it's less than a minute. When head hits the pillow to a sleep, probably less than a minute most nights.
If you're like me, that probably has something to do with staying up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. But now, the other thing that I hear people talk about, and I guess these are sleep study experts who say that, look, human dreams only last a few seconds. The actual brain activity of having that dream is real short, just a few seconds, even though it feels like days,
and that's
hours, whatever.
And that's the perception of time, and that amazes me as well. And I was relating this to what JJ told us about his dreams, and then later on this becomes reality. Not the dream, perhaps, or perhaps it's a vision from that reality. I don't know how it works, but I don't know how time works in this case. We perceive our lives as being linear.
Your guest card if you don't know how time works.
Well, it's interesting because I've had lots of sleep problems in the past, for health reasons, and so I've worn a watch for a long time that, now I've got an Apple Watch, but I've worn a Fitbit. I've worn all kinds of different, tracker type watches that track sleep patterns. And I know I don't know how they've gotten more accurate over time. I don't know how accurate they are 100%, but I'd always heard that, the dreams are when you're in that REM state, when you're in that deep sleep. But I know I have dreams when I'm in much lighter states of sleep, according to both the watch and also according to my own experiences, knowing that I never really got into a deep sleep. I was asleep for a short period of time. Like some of my most intense dreams are I've woken up once, like I wake up to get my wife up. She goes to work, so at 6 o'clock, 5:30, I'm getting up and waking her up. I'm up for 20, 30 minutes. And then I go back to sleep. And I'll go right into dreaming.
Yeah.
And, I know I'm not back down into that deep, deep sleep yet. And so I wonder how accurate the brain waves to dream correlation is in terms of those thoughts and what phase of sleep you are in the brain activity.
I can remember this one sleep study that I had. It's insane. They've got the EEG leads on you. They've got EKG leads on you. They've got GSR meters on you. They've got oxygen sensors. You have wires in every part of your body and cameras on you. And it's like, okay, just go to sleep like regular.
Yeah.
Easy task for you.
Easy
1 minute.
For you. Well, gentlemen, I believe this has been a good rundown. I've enjoyed it. It's 6:13, so I think it's probably about time to let people go get dinner. Anybody have any closing thoughts?
It was tremendous fun to have joined you.
That's been
And
great
an honor.
having you here.
I'm
Bert,
so
it's been
glad
an honor
that you came on, Bert.
having you with us. It really has. I'm really glad you came on. And all right, guys, I'm going to end this. And if anybody needs anything, let me know. I sure do appreciate everybody's time.
Thank y'all very much.
Thanks, Bert.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You
Bert.
too.
Bye, y'all.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello. This is Avalon Lee and Dankworth Smythe. I apologize for the lack of real-time Gang of Nerds error correction during this episode of the Paranormal Rundown. You see, I was concerned that they might feel emasculated, so I decided to let their myriad, and often amusing, errors slide for episode 16. Don't worry, I'll do double duty during episode 17, when I can be fairly certain their fragile male egos will have adequately recovered. We received a very pleasing review on Apple Podcasts from a listener called Chess1937. His review reads, "If you like listening to four guys from completely different backgrounds, all with integrity and self-reflection, rolling some digital dice to decide which of the 1600 plus topics, historical, philosophical, psychological, cryptozoological, religious, and many, many more, they are going to discuss in detail, and taking some scenic routes on the way to and from it. This is the podcast for you." Thank you, Chess1937. The Gang of Nerds is flattered and humbled by your words. But by now the Gang of Nerds is at 2,360 topics with several dozen more pending. The Paranormal Rundown is a joint production of Father Michael Birdsong, Dave Griffith, Vic Hermanson, and J.J. Johnson. From henceforth, by Avalon Lee executive decision, they will be known collectively as Gang of Nerds Media. The music used in this podcast is from Lobo Loco and Smart Sound. Any media clips the Gang of Nerds used in the podcast fall under the protection of the Fair Use Doctrine. Please take the time to rate and review the Paranormal Rundown wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to contact the Gang of Nerds directly, and I know you would, please write to them at feedback@paranormalrundown.com. Either of these simple actions will grant you lifetime immunity from being directly visited by me in your dreams. If not, most people recover from that visitation. Most, that is. See? We told you Dr. Bert was a poetic soul.